Hi, guys. Welcome back to the Crazy History Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the Christmas Truce. And yes, this was supposed to be a Christmas special, but I got a bit late. Yeah, I know. Okay, I get it. Um, let's begin, shall we? So, the Christmas Truce started during the first few months of the war. This was a symptom of what was an early war. And, well, everyone realized this war completely sucked because, well, they thought that it was going to be the glory and fame that their governments have promised, but of course, the government can always be trusted with these sort of things. So, as the true horrors of the war started to show through, many people were starting to push for peace even before Christmas had started. There was an open Christmas letter by British women to convince German and Austrian women to help end the war. And the Pope had also asked that on Christmas Day that there may be peace on the holy night. But of course, both governments who are fighting for freedom and Christianity and their values said no, just like good old Christians. But even in the trenches, there were already many daily truces and fraternizations that happened even before Christmas, such as times when rations were brought up and basically lunchtime became a time for peace and basically a time where no one was to attack. As well as when recon units saw each other, they would just ignore in the mood of live and let live to bring themselves some peace and calm in this hectic climate. On the front, the main enemy of the soldiers on both sides was the weather. Before Christmas, there were hectic storms and rain that filled up trenches with water. This quickly turned the mug into a wet bog and would suck in the soldiers like quicksand. And it wasn't rare for trenches to collapse and some people with them. Life was hell for the soldiers who would have to sleep against the wall in the away from the wet, sleeping next to each other for warmth, shivering in the cold. Supplies had to be hung on top of dugouts. Morale for the British was waning, and High Command did not approve of the hands off attitudes that the soldiers on the front had. This prompted Field Marshal Sir John French to take offensive operations, which resulted in extremely high casualties. So that basically made it worse. On the German side, however, there was better morale, since at the time they believed they were winning the war, and both sides were feeling homesick and wanted to go back to their families and friends to celebrate the holidays. So the governments on both sides took it upon themselves to bring Christmas to the trenches, bombarding the troops with cigarettes, tobacco, Christmas cards, sweets such as plum pudding, and chocolate, and also the delicacies such as wine, because Europeans, wine is favorite. As Christmas dawned, a true miracle came for the troops. The rain stopped, and in the cold, the mud froze over it, making it like a concrete sidewalk. And snow greeted the soldiers, and the rest of the front was a was a beautiful scene of peace and tranquility, which the troops had not seen in quite a while. The Germans, with the better morale, put up little Christmas trees with lights up upon their parapets. The British thought that the Germans were attacking them, but they heard something over the deathly silence of no man's land. Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht, the original version of Silent Night. The British commander saw this as another battle, one of Christmas spirit. I love it. This is just amazing. And he ordered his men to sing their own better carol, which, well, they thought it was a better carol. I don't know. I wasn't there. Give that man a raise, though, because the competition soon became into a harmony, and some brave soldiers were courageous enough to meet halfway and shake each other's hands on in the middle of a war. Remember, these guys a few hours ago were just trying to kill each other, and now they're shaking hands and like talking about things they share in common. This was super strange and just mind boggling for both sides. Like, no one ever expected this. But of course, Christmas has that sort of thing. Many people didn't know this, but this was happening all throughout the Western Front and even in the Eastern Front, where Austro Hungarians went up to Russians and asked for peace. Of course, not much is known about that, and of course, the Western one is more talked about, but that's what happens. There are some facts left out. Well, but also it was not everyone was not feeling this jolly spirit. One regiment silenced the German carols with machine guns, and of course the French and Belgians were not that happy to sing along with their invaders who were, destroying their countryside. And but the Germans held fire with respect, had some respect and decency, and allowed the French to do burials and had joint ceremonies to bury the dead. One person in the trenches that day was Bruns Baron's father, who talked about when this German and British sergeant met halfway and shook hands. What usually would be the sounds of artillery and rifles was replaced with laughter and life. As said by as Baron's father, there was not a single, there was not even an atom of hate on either side. There were many exchanges of presents and good times were shared by almost all. There were some misfires and distrust, though, and that should not be. This was not a completely happy event. There were times where sergeants and corporals got shot because of just the high tensions, because they are still enemies and they are still fighting a war. But overall, it was a pretty peaceful experience. And soon football games started out, and with Saxons and British challenging each other in games. These were all in good spirit and were very fun, as accounts say. And just a small community popped up with people getting haircuts, exchanging information, letters, cards, and gifts, and just having a fun time. Hermann Bauer was an infantryman on the trenches that day and said, "The infantry does not shoot anymore, just the crazy artillery. The masters make war, they have a quarrel, and the workers, the little men, have to stand there fighting against each other. Is that not a great stupidity?" And, well, that is how war worked and always happened. And now, just these small glimpses during time that people just saw each other as human beings, as just one another, instead of seeing as them as wild enemies, but just regular human beings who had so many shared experiences. And in some other alternate universe, if those exist, could have been friends or had not had to, or had not died or have to die. But of course, this is never known, and this is the history that happened, and it is a truly amazing spectacle to happen in the midst of the war. And the Christmas Truce was one of the last examples of old European chivalry and warfare. It shows that even a massive world war could not stop the holiday spirit. In a time in which enemies would communicate with bullets and violence, just this one day they would communicate face to face with respect. This holiday, this holiday was mostly made up of impromptu ceasefires and just the tranquil peace. But and just seeing the good sides of peace and just a little calm before they had to go to war again. Like, imagine that they became like good friends, and somehow right after they just went back to becoming enemies and just had to start like shooting each other. Many people died. Many people never lived to live for another Christmas or even the next few months or days. And high command on both sides just did not approve of it, and were forced soldiers either by pressuring them by court martials and just doing constant artillery bombardments, which allowed no time for peace ever again. This was a rare event, and probably one of the few that has ever happened. But of course, this is history, and this has been the Crazy History Podcast. Thank you for listening.